We had we have to wait on Channel 4 to be able to come up. I have some notes that I wanted to make about several items that were discussed last week, and just to catch up on some other things. The first thing is about Project Restore. Let me start off saying that at the end of the year, Monday, I'll be giving the state of the city, and it will be a forward-looking message, of course. We'll talk about where we are and where we'd like to be as a community. But I do think it's important to note in December of 2025, we find ourselves a year out from the election cycle. And I have noted in several terms in this job that the tenor and the way people talk to each other and move forward seems to miraculously, but not in a good way for the Christmas time, change. Only in that third year. So as the jockeying and the positioning for that occurs, the tone of this room changes. I have told many folks, and I will still hear, just because I think people make an assumption. You will hear from time to time, it must be hard with the mayor and the council not getting along, and I always say in this term, it's been the easiest and best getting along, Mr. Farrell, that I've experienced. I don't know what happens internally with the council, but I can say that from my end, it's been a pleasure and easy to do. I noted a very substantive change in that on Tuesday. I still have not heard all of it. I could hear it from my vantage point outside my office some, but I have not gone back and listened in detail. But I understand there were some things said that were very personal, and I think without doubt inappropriate at a council meeting. And I'm not sure why folks would feel it necessary to lecture about divisiveness, division, and say the most divisive things that I've heard in many years. People have the right to do lots of things, ladies and gentlemen. People have the freedom of speech and the right to do and say just about anything they want. There's always been a difference between the notion of having the right to do something and whether one should do that something. And those are just two different things. The redistricting issue, unfortunately, has been used in a sense to divide, and by that I mean to elevate it into things that do happen elsewhere in the country. There are redistricting plans that involve racial discrimination. There are redistricting plans that involve improper or very targeted misalignments of communities of interest on purpose to get one person elected or another. And those are unfortunate things. And they're also things that I would have zero tolerance to be part of and have a record of my life to show that I can back that statement up. The problem is here, none of that exists. And not only was there an opportunity to show it did, but it just doesn't exist. From courtroom battles, drops, to opportunities to present any evidence, you have what someone says versus what is, what facts bear out. And they just don't exist. So I'm mindful that election season's coming around, but I will not allow myself to be baited into a tit for tat on the level of negativity I heard. I too could have several of my own biblical verses that would directly bear on what I heard. But I'm not going to do that, and I don't think it's the proper thing in the first place to do. I certainly, in my faith tradition, I don't think that my Lord is in this fray, in this thing that we're talking about. I think this is pure politics, and I've said over and over that doesn't make it wrong or evil or anything else. It just is what it is. It's politics. And to elevate it to something beyond that, I think is using this opportunity in the wrong way, and I'll leave it at that. I remain open to work with anyone and everyone, and will continue to do that, I hope, the rest of my life. I will also make sure that communities of interest stay together, but will always have a mind toward any marginalized communities being protected by everything I have in me to do, as I have, and my report card shows, for the whole of my life. So again, people can say whatever they want, but they can't bring the receipts on it. And I see now that you can just claim you brought the receipts, and somehow that allegedly is bringing the receipts. That's not what bringing the receipts means. Giving another opinion about your last opinion is not bringing the receipts. Bringing the receipts is having evidence. And I'm going to go back to Restore, because before we talk about redistricting, I hope everyone can go back and look at Tuesday and see it quickly left redistricting and just became a whole litany of things unrelated to redistricting, of complaints and divisive comments. And one of them was comparing the Restore that was brought up to the Project Restore that was the utility version, not using that name, and saying, and members saying, yeah, I shouldn't have been for that, I wasn't. And it's astounding that someone would announce after the fact that they should not have been for something that returned 7 figures of help to people, that stood back up a utility that when I walked in was in absolute existential crisis and failure, that lost 2 bond ratings over that period, and that now the same S&P rating structure is saying you got it at least moving in the right direction again, and then some. It's shocking that the way it was set up before, under that council's watch as well, but I think you'd have to put the blame where it goes on the administration decisions that led to it. You're talking about on day one coming in to tens of millions of dollars in the hole on a utility I left in great shape. All of my statements are auditable. They're audited. So everything I'm going to tell you today, I can back up with an audit by a third party. I hear that a little bit like, why don't they need to get a independent audit on all those folks? We have one every year. By law, the legislative auditor has to do that. And so that already exists. The utility structure under Project Restore took it from an existential threat to normative operations in a year or two. And the swing was 10.5 million net loss position to 15.19 million net positive. By my math, that's a $25 million swing this administration did by decision making, not luck, not the trend was already happening, we're falsely taking credit, but actual decisions that undid 4 terrible decisions I've been over with all of you and turned those around and restored it. $25 million swing, down 10.5, audited statement, up to 15.19 audited. So the first thing someone should say, if you're not cynical but don't trust government, and I would suggest you probably should remain that way throughout your lives, is, well, wait, then the people have to have paid more. Absolutely not. It's about how you run it and take care of things. We are right now, every month, I won't say December, November, I think fuel costs, we've had some shifts there for everybody, but I have been publishing from back before June to now, 1 month we were number 2. Against all of our comparators, we've been number 1. We're so cheap that in more than one instance, you're moving into what I would call malfeasantly cheap, meaning you're not recovering enough by your rate structure and what you do to cover the expenses in a way. Mr. Carpenter, I'm looking at you nodding. You're the finance director. It's a concern from an audit standpoint, is it not?
Yes.
Okay. So those are not things to trick anybody. You're the rate makers as council members. You're going to have to address it. The legislative auditor is going to address it. That's not administration, that's council. And it's not even council, it's us, it's we, it's the city. We have to deal with these things together. But a $25 million swing to the positive, and you're the lowest in all your comparators in the state, which is roughly the lowest in the state, that ought to tell people something about fact versus fiction and opinion and the lies that you're hearing. The truth is, you ought to be using this utility as leverage for economic development. Just like probably the most important economic development leverage we have in this community is CLECO, a utility. Why? It's a simple answer. Because they build the infrastructure to connect people, and by doing so can offer the incentive to, you come spend this much capital expenditure, CapEx, you create this many jobs, we know we're going to have this use from you in the future, we're willing to bet against that. So we're going to extend this infrastructure at either little or no cost to you because we're going to have you as a customer over time. So they have a real keen interest in studying what companies they would want to come, what they need, et cetera. They have an interest in studying land use, everything you can imagine about natural and man-made resources in the area. We have a similar ability with partnerships with the Chamber, with Louisiana Central and others to do that. Our little local utility can be used that way. It can't be used that way if it's allowed to fail, but it only will fail if there's a choice made to do that. It won't be because it can't be run right. We just showed in 2.5 years what you can do with it. So independent auditing shows the AUS net position made that change. The independent auditing, you can look at exactly why it happened and what fixed it. Restore saved the utility from a crash. It returned thousands of individual accounts to positive accounts. Thousands of accounts. We remain the lowest cost provider in Louisiana within 3 to 5 daily. Again, many times the lowest. I would say also in our utilities, our drainage infrastructure is working a lot better and will continue to. We had a long discussion about that. Our gas, our wastewater, our water is so low, it really is in a dangerous situation when you think about having a plan for future costs. Not the water itself, not the delivery to your house, but when you think about the cost of future infrastructure, a rate has to be tied to that. The idea that folks are out there telling people that's not true is wild. This is not a novel way that cities run utilities or that private utilities run themselves. That rates are tied to the cost of having employees discharge the services needed to operate, plus some ability to think about future costs, emergencies, rainy days, plus the cost of infrastructure to maintain and project need into the future. If you don't have at least those three, I would add a fourth component, but those are the basic three. If you don't have those three in place, your structure is wrong. So what Restore did was offer many, many folks here the opportunity of a forgiven amount. You can call it a grant, you can call it whatever you want, that lopped off a piece of the whole amount that was owed. I will say again, bring your receipts that show that you had to pay back that portion. We've been asking now, it's been 3 years, can we just see the person had to pay it back? Bring the receipts that it was a loan. It's been 3 years, certainly we can prove that that's a false statement if it is. Again, I can't stop people from saying it, council members, but I'm just telling you that it's a pretty strange day when the council and the administration come up with a way to help people who were really lulled into a troubled place, right? I always felt that the justification for the grant portion of it and the amortizing out of what people owed over time and all the new contracts that were entered into to get people out of a problem was justified by the fact that if government, previous administration, but government nonetheless, lulled people into the problem, they're at fault too. And so that justifies even forgiving parts of those bills. I had to fight for that, by the way, because again, the legislative auditor would say, if you used it, you owe it. And it doesn't matter if someone didn't bill you. If you go to the ATM machine and it spits out $500 and you were asking for $50, it's not, the $450 is not yours. And it's theft to keep it. I don't look at the thing with the utility the same way. I'll look at it as if someone's not getting a bill or they don't know, that's a lot of fault on the city. We're a public body. We need to be responsible for that. But I didn't create the problem, but we sure fixed it. We sure fixed it. And so when someone says they're ashamed they voted for Restore but can't bring the receipt of why they would be ashamed to do something that helped so many people, that's astounding. And it's convenient. It's a political convenience that should see the light of day, the sunshine, the great sanitizer that sunshine is for truth. Look, it's a negative for me to keep bringing it up because each time you bring it up, you bring in a new set of people doubting and saying whatever. But I've decided, we as a group, my staff and I have decided that you also can't be quiet and just let the narrative keep being untrue. That in today's world won't work either. So I'm proud of the work we did with Restore. It both restored the utility, as I explained, but it restored families who would not have been able to do that had that been collected some other way. And folks that were telling people not to take it because it was some kind of loan or trick or whatever, just again, I've said it before, shame on you. But none of you have come forward to show that. And I will say this at the risk of it hurting some feelings. When we hear about people that have, and the council knows this, high bills, there are, utilities make mistakes, all of them do, including this one. You can have a transposed number, you can have it got a zero added to it, you come in and we take care of that. I've said over and over, Mr. Fowler, I had a $50,000 bill one time. $50,000. I don't even know how that could happen in the system, but it did. I didn't owe 50. But 99.9999% probably, and if I'm wrong, Paul, you tell me, it's just simply not a high bill. It's because you have multiple months of non-payment. So any bill is going to look high if you haven't paid in 3 or 4 months. And that's another lulling that communities can do that hurts you. But other utilities don't do that. You can't get that anywhere else. And that can cause a problem. We work with people, but there has to be some set of standards so that you out there are not subsidizing other people's utilities, and you're not subsidizing in a way that would never make them modify behavior, not run at a certain time, et cetera. We are constantly looking at ways to help, and we are promoting that now with ideas of how to structure rate better. But the bottom line is, I don't have the authority, ladies and gentlemen at home, I do not have the authority to forgive a utility bill. Council members that tell you when you make a complaint to them that you need help, you'll forward it to the mayor, are copping out on their responsibility. Only the city council has the rate-making authority to affect rate and do those things. We don't. We have to follow and administer the law. And when someone does that, call them on it and say, no, I'm not asking you to shove it off on the mayor. You tell me what you're going to do about the problem. But in the meantime, when you just need help because you got behind, and if you've been in good faith and you're trying, you call the utility office. You don't have to go through a council person who's just going to kick it off and not do anything. Just call the people that will go out of their way to try to help you. But if people are abusive of that, and every month they don't pay, and all of those problems are never addressed, it gets hard. It isn't because people don't want to extend grace or help. It's because we're not legally able to not charge for those services. I have to follow the law and enforce it as the executive branch. I don't make the law. The council does. Don't be fooled by this anymore. All right. December 16th was the meeting that I wanted to cover Restore, but I want to just go over some of those statements real quick and just let everybody know. There are some people in the room, I think, who are having interest in this and that are following it, and I will just let you know again, any statements I make and anything in the veto message can be backed up. Even the veto message's conclusions about some of the political parts of this, of why Ms. Felter would have been carved out, I have backed up by interviews with people. Was this statement made to you? How do you know this? I don't know how to explain it over and over a different way, and I don't think I want to sound, it's not to sound like it's not important, but some people are offended by the politics of redistricting. It doesn't offend me unless it violates laws, unless it's racially discriminatory or whatever. It's just part of politics. It's what every congressional person does for their district. Every state legislator does this all the time. But you were told a few things that need to be corrected. One, that the process that happened that was led by the Felter plan was unfair to voters. There is zero truth to that. That is not only just an opinion statement, there's no basis for use of the word unfair. The council decides that. In the case of District 3, which is the Perry district, the African American majority under the Felter plan is greater than under the Perry, Larverdane, Davidson, Porter plan. It's preserved more as a majority-minority district. That's a fact. How do you argue that? The RAPC admits it. We can all look at the numbers. You can look at the board. So there's no unfairness created there. The most aggrieved party in this analysis, if you look at who would be the most aggrieved by the change, well, that's obvious. There's one person who was taken out of her district. That's not a debatable thing. That's a fact. One person was carved out of running for her district. The letters I've received from at least the Garden District area within that district, I'm sure there's some outside of it, but certainly from there, we're all in favor of the veto. I've not received a written letter from a voter saying, I want the Perry, Larverdane, Davidson, Porter plan. I've not received one. I went through the letters that I received from the Felter district, if you will, to give it a name that's not a number. There are some emails, there's not a lot of form letters. They're individual letters from people. Some of them are quite lengthy. I have one that I'm going to talk about, and I wasn't going to name names, but it's a public record. This is from the person who ran against Ms. Felter. He's written 2 letters. His name is Tom Spencer, and he's very, very vocal about keeping the community of interest together in which he lives, and how this would be devastating to that. Let's go through some little simple things to make this clear. So the only letters I received that way, I did go back and look. There are some, I won't call them form emails. There's some emails that have similar language, but they're emails from individuals. It's not a form letter that got passed around. Most of the things I have aren't that. They're letters from people or emails by themselves. So one comment was unfair, I just went through. This is another comment I heard over and over from Mr. Green. This is a perplexing one. It's as perplexing as the issue about fixing a roof at the fire department to me. And here's how it went. The entire city, that's a quote, did not approve this redistricting plan, but the entire city approved the original redistricting plan that would be called the Davidson Porter Plan. That was said more than once. The entire city approved it. Was that said? The entire city, right? So the city didn't vote on any of these plans, so that's not true for that reason. I assume, if I'm given due to this somehow, that what it meant was there was a 7 voter, the entire council voted for that plan at the time. But the city did weigh in on that plan, because 2 of the members who were responsible for that plan, in fact, Davidson and Porter, whose plan it is and was brought to you as the council, were defeated and are no longer parties in interest to it as elected officials. So I think the people did speak on the plan. They at least spoke on the folks that advanced the plan. So the entire city did not approve it, but the entire city, ultimately, those who chose to go vote, did make a statement about it, the authors of the plan. So the plan's 2 authors lost their seats. Voting on the Davidson Porter plan was by a different council than sits here today. Ms. Felter was in her district when she qualified. It was based on the 2010 census plan, and that's what they ran on. After qualification, when the council voted on that plan, they changed it out so that the next time she ran, she would either have to move or advance a change in the plan. All normal, and exactly what happened, and achieved a plan that had many similar features. Neither plan was wrong in and of itself, just one gutted the Garden District and took her out of her own district. So that's a decision that the council was able to make, and they voted, I think, 4-3 on that one to pass that plan. So I guess the idea here was we're going to go back and say it was unfair and 4-3 it the other way. But no one can say why the Felter plan is unfair, just that it undid the original plan.
Mayor, you got a lot of letters from people in favor of it. Did any of the people that spoke for the other plan, were they affected by this change?
Well, I don't know where each person who spoke, I didn't include those folks, but I will say I did receive 2 verbal calls from District 3. So I have two to me that I'll count these guys in a second who can't come here to the meeting. I'm not sure where they live, but I think at least 1, if not 2, persons that have spoken multiple times live in District 3. I don't know that, I think. But the 2 calls I received from District 3, who are very close to council members involved, called and said, not only did you do the right thing, I don't understand this. So that's only 2 calls I've had from District 3. They're not in writing, but I've received those calls. And they're people you would all know. They're well-known community folks. The people who testified here I'm assuming they testified before, 1, 2, 3, 4, Ms. Bell and maybe others. She may live I think she does live in that district. So she would be a voice that would say, I'm against changing this plan.
Is she living in the area affected?
I don't know that. I don't know that. Not in the Garden District. I don't know if she lives in something that would have been affected by the District 3. I know this, what was stated about the racial basis for and all that is not true, as we've established conclusively. So, to me, it just comes down to support of a candidate or what you want to happen politically, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just think if it is that, let's call it that. Let's not call it something beyond that causes divisiveness at that level. So, 2 members of the council were defeated, so the people spoke in that way. I believe, based on the evidence I know of and the personal discussions I've had, that more probably than not, the writing out of Ms. Felter from that district was on purpose. And people who live in that district tell me that in great numbers. And comments were made to people, and even from here, that support that. You gotta choose, you gotta believe it or not. I think if you look at the history of other things, it's pretty easy to believe. It's a pattern. So I'll just leave that at that. It wouldn't matter, by the way, in any of this analysis. You could throw that out. It's still a permissible thing to do. And incumbency protection, when 61% of the people put you in, is a proper consideration to make. More importantly, and that's the point, the Felter Plan fixed a terrible rewrite of communities of interest. Fixed a terrible rewriting of communities of interest. I don't see the same thing in the District 3 change. Like, what happens there is not. In fact, the Felter Plan doesn't just protect the community of interest of the Garden District, which everyone in this community knows is perhaps the most robustly proud of themselves defined community of interest in the city. It's a good thing. You wish everybody felt that way about their neighborhood. But also, South Alexandria and City Park, clearly communities of interest. If you think about City Park and how they also are preserved in the Felter Plan and not in the other. I also heard one council member keep saying that folks went to him and said, I feel abandoned, I'm out of your district now. So in the same race that Ms. Felter ran, Mr. Gary Johnson ran, and it would have been on the 2010 census plan. So that plan was going to change no matter what because of the 2020 census. But you ran on that plan, and then it was going to change no matter what. So whether it becomes Davidson, Porter, or Felter, a change was coming. So no one could feel vested in that plan. So that statement is not true. It makes zero sense. Don't get me wrong. I think Gary was told that. I think Gary's being totally truthful. People may have said that. But what they don't realize they're saying is the change is from you ran on the 2010 existing one because the council submitted it so late, they didn't have the 2020 plan in place. So it could be true that people felt they're no longer in his district. It just has nothing to do with Ms. Felter's plan. It has everything to do with that plan was never going to exist any longer. Do you see? I know it seems convoluted. It's really not. One plan was never going to continue, the one they both ran on. You either have Davidson Porter, which no one's ever run on, or you have Felter, which Ms. Perry has ran and won big on. These arguments, I would give them speciousness to say that they're not true, but they look on their face like they could be, but I don't even think it's that at this point. Not once you come back during the veto message and double down on divisiveness and negativity way beyond it after the record is clear of what occurred. And I know people at home are saying there's bigger fish to fry, there's things to worry about, public safety and all, but the districts and how you apportion one person, one vote in the city is as big an issue as there is. That is the issue. And people having the right to vote for whom they want instead of having the council pick who you can vote for is a huge issue. It is a core issue in democracy. Along with free speech, the right to vote and the right to have the apportionment of districts done fairly is as important as anything there is in our Constitution. So only the Felter Plan has been now used in an election this census. That should matter. Next, and the last one I'll bring up for today. There was a repeated claim that the RAPC independently drafted maps for Davidson Porter that now Ms. Felter went and made up for herself that took away independence. Guys, the RAPC is not in charge of drawing the maps through some independent group that meets and puts them out. They draw the maps by listening to the legislators, just like as happens at the state level, and just like the states do it for Congress. But if you don't think congresspersons go to the state legislature and try to jockey them to do their districts how they want, just go on TV and Google it and you can watch them. I mean, it's as much done as anything there is. Well, Ms. Felter can go, just as did Ms. Davidson, and meet with RAPC and want a district to be done a certain way. Here's how that works. I'd like my district to look just like this. This is the perfect district for me. It's the one I want. RAPC can go, okay, incumbent member, we're going to try to do that, but you realize what you want affects 4 other people. So I've got to talk to all of them, and on it goes. And as long as RAPC does its job, which is to ensure at the end of the day it's one person, one vote, or within the percentages that are allowed to get there, the maximum deviation, whatever that is, they have to deal with all the council persons and what they want to figure out how to do that. But let me assure you, it can start and finish with council members wanting to do it, as long as it's within that maximum permitted deviation. The RAPC doesn't independently go, here's the best practice, y'all have to adopt this. Doesn't happen and didn't happen here in any of the cases. You're being sold a bill of goods out there, ladies and gentlemen. You're just not being told the truth at all. RAPC takes the desires, wishes, and wants of members into account. They have to achieve one person, one vote. It's not an independent assessment by them. They make independent judgments along the way to tell you, hopefully in good faith, what you need to do. Okay. I'm going to answer any questions on that, and then we're going to click through the rest of it real easily. But I have any information I can give. I never read the veto message into the record. I'm not. It's too long, but it is not difficult reading. You can go through it. It's organized and it concludes very easily with, when the aims of a plan are moderately analyzed, in this case, the disputes revealed their purely political nature masquerading as legal ones. It becomes a simple choice when the facts get in the way of the story. Therefore, in and as required by the public interest and to avoid improper use of public proceedings for purely political purposes, in considering the due respect, comity, deference, and respect for the council, holding those members to their chosen declared reasons, meaning they declared it was a Voting Rights Act. They declared it was unfair. If I hold them to that reason to adopt the Davidson Porter and re-adopt the Larverdane Perry ordinance, I had no choice but to veto it. And everyone that I speak with from all around the city has thanked me for it, congratulated us for doing it, and feels it was the right thing. You don't use a veto on just anything. You use a veto when there's something seriously wrong. Otherwise, you respect the legislative majority. A veto is there. If you think about it, there are 7 members of our council, 7. 2 are at large. The mayor is at large. If 4 members do something and it's important enough for it to be vetoed, this 8th vote, if you will, that doesn't occur often but can, now 3 at-large folks are saying it's even now. If you presumably have 4, you have to get to 5. You've got to peel off one of those at-larges to win the day. That makes total organizational and structural sense. To suggest that now you see who has the final say-so would be to say that every government and every state that has a executive veto is somehow doing something wrong. And what food do we feed that's so different than it's not different. It's the same. I have a veto and a line item veto when it comes to the budget. Other mayors have that, governors have that, the president that's what the executive branch does. It is a check. When we were in civics, we learned this. Right? Checks and balances. It's so one branch can't overpower the other. That's what it's there for. It's not magic and it's not mean and it's not unfair. It's just how things work. And in this case, the right thing occurred. And the council could have pulled that 5th vote, that at-large vote or another member, whatever it would take, and then they would be able to override it. But if you look at the structure, you really have 3 at-large elected people, the mayor and 2 at-larges, and you have 4. You have the 5 district members. It makes sense. All right, questions? All right, the next item on the agenda was housing findings published by professionals and offered to the city council. I just want to say again to all the members here present and to others, look, we don't plan on each meeting to follow with a briefing that points out all the things that were said wrong, but Mr. Fowler, years ago, we had to do just that, if you recall. You hadn't seen us doing that this whole term. But seeing what I saw the other night, or hearing what I heard, that we're not going to let that stand, the stuff that's untrue and divisive at that level. Here's the report that all of you have on housing. This is one of the best reports I've ever seen the city produce. I've always said we've got folks that we can use instead of hiring consultants. I've always pushed back on having people from out of town tell you everything. There's a place for it. You need it in lots of subject matter areas, but this is a report that tells you how we can address our problems. And this report is about home ownership. And the irony is that people say, well, Mayor, you're saying that now, why didn't you do it before? Because before I could be the lone voice in the wilderness because there was a whole push about apartments. I always was out there saying, I don't think this is the best thing for the people that we are seeking to protect in marginalized communities and elsewhere. It's going to lead to continued problems. But I was alone on that a lot of the time. I think there's a place for it. You have to have rental. But home ownership does something different in a community. It's better for everybody if you can do it. So we're out front on this. We're not hiding from it. But the idea that you can just go get container houses and all kind of other things and just lop them into neighborhoods when there are building codes and other rules is also, ladies and gentlemen, someone selling you something. That's not true. And what they're selling you is, I'm for this. If the mayor does something to stop it, it's because he wants to not let us do this. It's not true. It's because I'm constrained by state law that doesn't allow the mayor to suspend state building codes. And you shouldn't want that either at home. And the reason you shouldn't want that is you should want to live in safe, sanitary housing. You shouldn't want a council member to impose on you a living standard that, frankly, no one deserves. And so that's what those laws are in place to do.
We've also made tremendous investments in order to get a #1 fire rating, which would be destroyed if we changed the codification.
The councilman's point was the #1 fire rating that we've attained for the first time in this, during this cycle, this term, that those things could be jeopardized. Now, let me agree with the council and the chair of legal on this in a more general sense. We need many options. We need innovative, multifaceted options to address modern problems in housing. We agree there. What we are taking issue with is that the work we're doing, thrown in the last meeting of the year like a list of things that aren't happening, was done that way. It looked political because it was. And there's going to be a lot of complication when you ask to do container houses or modular houses any old way, anywhere, and not under certain standards. No one's going to be for that. But we are for innovative ways to use modularized housing and other options through overlays and other things where it makes sense and where people want it. The Restore plan, I think y'all took up a resolution. I saw it. I read it. I had a District 1 person call me 3 days ago now and said, so Mayor, you're not going to bring out to the public that the very folks, these council members advancing that, who are claiming that's good for people who are marginalized and income challenged, you're not going to point out that it incentivizes, so it's a $25,000 cap. So this person from District 1 said, I can't believe that that's being advanced. That would incentivize that person to remain single, because it's a single, to remain single, to never earn more than $25,000, And to do that for 15 years, to limit yourself to that for 15 years, in default of which you don't get to own the house. You just paid all that and you have no equity and move on. I saw the problems with it, but I chalked it up to everybody's in good faith trying to get us somewhere. I don't anymore after what I heard. That person lives in District 1. That person is offended by this. I'm not offended by it. I think we can work together to figure out how to get through it and do something that's worthwhile. But I'm never going to be for a plan that tells someone, you've got to stay at that income level for 15 years for the chance to own a $100,000 house or a $115,000 house. Because that incentivizes one of two things. You're going to have another hustle to make your life work over that period of time, or you're going to be holding that person down to no growth for 15 years. Neither of those make sense. That's one thing wrong with it. There's a whole bunch of other things wrong. A whole bunch of things, like the city being a mortgagee, like the city we talked about Project Restore for utilities. How is the city, what happens when someone doesn't pay their mortgage note to the city? What happens in a default? How does the city default people? Should the city be getting these properties? That's no place for a city to be. And by the way, we've outlined the dollar-wise plan and other ways to do it right here. That's all. It's all here. Other ways to do it through commercial resources and banks where we can go in and help, where you gap finance and help those things happen. That's the smart way to do that. There's a bunch wrong with it. I mean, I won't waste time today on all the things. There'll be another day to do that. But to act like we're not pushing that and that's the way to get there, that's going to hurt poor people, not help them. That's not going to lift people out of poverty. That's going to keep a tamp down of them in poverty. Nonsense. Council request for action, information, use of Alex Connects and reports. Look, we answer things from the council every day. We answer things from the public every day. I continue to tell people Alex Connects is the best way for you to follow and get things done. I realize not everybody has that app or wants it or will. We are happy to take requests from council members. I think they're best when they're big things, like we need you to look at drainage here or whatever. For a council member to write to change a bulb is a weak turnaround on a set of letters that then we go out and do. We don't always report back that bulb was changed. It makes little sense to do it that way. When we get a letter on a bulb, we just go do it. But Alex Connects would be faster. If we get a letter from a council member that we need to take action to do something that is not lawful or proper, I'm stuck in a position. I can either write back and make a big legal issue of it, largely issue, like I might have done at 36, which I don't do now. Or we can call and talk and try to get through it. But if that's going to be used against us, I don't know. What do we do? If we published all the requests we get from council members, some, not all, but some members, they wouldn't like that to be published. At least not the responses. But we're here to help. I'm not here to play any tricks. If council members need to do something or want to have an event or anything else, if you come in, there's always a way to do it. So if it's important to you, it's important to me. And I'll do everything I can to make sure it's done right. But if there's a resentment that there's a right way to do it and a wrong way, I can't help you with that. You just gotta, that's how we can work together. I'm going to spend my holiday time getting in the right frame of mind about some of the stuff I heard as ugly and the worst I've ever heard in all my time in the city. The worst. As ugly as that was, I'm going to do what I have to do to let that go. And I got people working on me about that. But it wasn't a nice thing to say about anybody. And I did take it that it was said toward a person, because all of you did. I tried to say, no, that was a general statement. I was assured I was wrong. Guys, we got a lot of work to do in this community. There's a real there had been a cautious optimism. There's actually a realizable jump forward if we work together. On Reignite, I think where the chamber is, membership growing, those are all good signs. Sales tax, all of these indicators I'll give at the state of the city. Louisiana Central's new leadership, on the hind end of good leadership before, good people involved for years. All of these are opportunities for us. We've got some hard work to do. Public safety will always be the front door of economic development and everything else. That will always have to be right or getting right and getting better measurably at all times. But we have opportunities. And I want to move us off cautious optimism into obtainable, realizable, future-proofing, and here's where we're about to be. But we're going to have to do that together. It's the only way it can happen, is we have to all be together, and we got to work hard. And if people would just spend 90% of their time, if we spent our time on the things we agree on and got them done, we would leap forward. But we spend so much time on meaningless, immaterial difference. Meaningless, immaterial difference. If we would stop that, we'd be fine. I will have my Christmas and holiday message after Monday, so I won't say that today, but I will say, for those I don't get to see before then, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to you. I hope you all get to spend time with your families, reconnect. It's the most important thing you can do. Forgive every chance you get. You'll be the beneficiary of forgiveness, I can assure you. So think about that over this season. That's what it's for. We had a very successful FET. Thank you, Tanya. It was huge. It was huge, with a lot of new things, with a lot of novelties. I understand there could be a really crazy one next year, and I won't announce. That has to do with the ice rink. Could be cool. We'll see. I had some pressure on that one from somebody of some repute. So we'll see. But we're going to keep doing innovative things there. And we're going to keep making those events safer and thinking about it. But I got to tell y'all, I don't want to end on a bad note, but it's harder and harder to do that. And we have to have different sets of protections in place all over. But one of those is we're going to have to figure out how we engage our young folks in a good way that keeps them from being, I'll just say, unsupervised, because the most well-meaning things can turn into something unintended. Just a group of kids screaming and running can look like something it's not and be all over social media, appearing as something it's not. And then worse, the kids get the bad rep for that, and people say ugly things, and it's not, they're just being kids. Those are the same thing kids did when I was a kid at the Rapides Parish Fair. It just wasn't this to capture it and say something about it. But they all did that. People got in fights. People did all kind of stuff at the fair. Sorry, fair. But
You know that from personal experience?
I mean, people, I'm not going to say they met up to go fight at a fair, but I'm going to say that I've maybe seen that happen before.
True is true.
Yeah, so kids are doing things kids do. But with this, the dangers are amplified. What it can turn into is amplified. So we'll continue to make sure that things are right. I will tell people that I saw no evidence, and the chief is here. I know that there was some claim about the FET that I was here, I saw what happened, and it's not true. But when kids are screaming and running and saying, yelling whatever, it can appear that way, but we know better. But that doesn't mean we don't always have to keep preparing better. So any questions on any of that? We had a lot of questions about our economic development. I'll save that for when I go over the state of the city. But folks, to act like at the end of the year we needed an economic development. I mean, we have a plan, we publish what we're doing all the time. I'm not sure where that one came from, but we'll be loading you up with what that economic development plan is, and we'll make sure that there's more opportunities. I would just start with, go online, look at Think Alex. It's not stale material. It was an 18-month process that outlined every facet of this city and what we should do. I think there should be some freshening up with technology and things that have changed, but other than that, I think that plan remains intact. Okay, 5 o'clock. I want to thank everybody for coming out on a Friday before the holiday. I'm sorry that we started late, but we had to accommodate a very important and dear friend of mine who's operating that back there, and he had a totally legit excuse. And I will see y'all next week, unless he says we're not going to be here next week.
And what you were saying is all sound bites.